Alright you guys, welcome back to the Real Tea and Fishing YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to go over what I consider to be the top 5 most common mistakes that will either ruin a catfishing trip or simply just cause you not to catch them. Now, while fishing for big giant blues and flatheads can be an awesome thrill and is super fun, it is a lot harder than most people realize. It takes a lot of work. It takes knowledge, knowing when and where to go. It's a number of key factors. So I'm going to dive into a little deeper detail of these common mistakes and ways to prevent them to ultimately help you have more success catfishing. Alright, so mistake number 1, ignoring the right bait choice. A lot of times when you ask people what's the first bait that comes to mind when you think about catfishing, and they're going to say chicken liver. But I am here to tell you that chicken liver is the most overhyped and overused catfishing bait that there is. Sure, it'll catch some fish, but the hassle of fishing with them is just simply not worth the return in my opinion. They just don't work well enough to justify using them on a regular basis. I just don't like to fool with them personally. For me, fresh bait is the go-to choice. It always has been. And when I say fresh bait, I prefer to use fresh panfish such as bluegill, shellcracker, brim. There's 100 names, whatever anyone likes to call them. Or gizzard shad, threadfin shad, skipjack herring, if you can get those. Now the best way to catch the shad obviously is with a cast net, but a lot of times I like to just go out with a can of worms, red worms, and a bobber, and I will catch fresh bait the day that I'm fishing. That seems to work the best for me because you ultimately want to use bait fish from the body of water that you're targeting catfish in. That is where their food source comes from, and that is what they are looking for. That is what they eat day in and day out. So ideally, fresh bait is the right choice. Okay, so mistake number 2 is location, where and when to fish, and just simply understanding the habits of these catfish. A lot of times if you were to ask someone, where do I need to go catch big catfish at? Then they'll say the deepest part of the river or deep river channels. Now there's truth in that. You most definitely can catch big giant fish in 100 foot of water, 80 foot of water, but from personal experience for me, the 10 to 50 foot range is where I've caught probably 90% of the big fish that I've caught. You don't always need deep water. Big fish constantly move and follow bait fish, so a lot of times they can be in shallow water. So that's a thing I think that gets overlooked a lot of times is, the water depth and, where you need to fish, how deep you need to fish. If you're like me and you happen to live in the southeastern part of the United States, like I said, I'm located here in Chattanooga, so our winters aren't that cold. They're pretty mild. You can fish year round. You can catch fish in the springtime. You can catch fish in the summer, fall. The wintertime, the bite, I feel like kind of slows down. And then obviously, late spring, early summer when spawn happens, the bite really slows down. But they can still be caught. Fish eat all the time. It's not like they're like, oh, hey, it's cold out, we got to quit eating. So what I like to do when I'm reading a river or a spot, I'm trying to find a spot to go catfishing, I like to find a spot on the river to where it's, we'll say 4 to 5 foot deep, and then over an area of about 75 to 100 yards, it drops off gradually from that 4 to 5 foot range down to about 60 to 70 foot. Like it's a river shelf is what it's called. And a lot of times, from what I've learned, catfish will sit on those shelf ledge right there in the river. And what they do is they lay there and they wait to attack bait fish. Bait fish come through in that shallow water and they will come up, and that's how they feed. Those seem to be the best spots for me. I think a key point to remember though is all waterways are different. And fish constantly move. Fish do not just stay in the same spot. Big trophy size blues and flatheads do not just pick a spot in the river and say, this is where I'm going to live for the next 20 years. They constantly move because the food source constantly moves, so they have to follow the food source. So I think that's a really key thing to keep in mind. I think the main point that I'm trying to get across with this is that to find these fish, you need to get out and fish. Time doesn't really matter. Fish are not more active at night than they are during the day. You can catch fish any time of the day. Just, you need to get out and fish. You can't catch fish if you're not out fishing. So you just have to go out and try. And don't fish the same spot for too long. Study up on the habits of these types of catfish, whether it's blues or flatheads, because their habits are different. You put in a little bit of time and a little bit of practice, and with just a little bit of luck, I promise you, you can go out and catch these big fish. Okay, so the third mistake that people commonly make is selecting the wrong tackle or selecting the wrong gear in general. I recently made a video a couple weeks ago on affordable catfishing gear, and I will leave a link to that below. This is all gear that I personally use, and it works, and I have caught plenty of big fish on. But your gear selection is critical. Now, I'm not saying go out and spend $300 on a reel and then pair it with a $200 rod, because you don't need to do that. But if you have the money to spend on more expensive gear, then by all means, go for it. But one thing I always try to make a key point is that fishing, especially catfishing, can be affordable for anyone. So, in my opinion, your reel is the most vital component of your gear. While everything plays a factor in it, a good reel will make a world of difference. I always like to look for one with a good amount of drag. Around 25 to 30 pounds is that range that I usually look for. And there are several reasonably priced reels out there on the market, and the same goes for rods as well. But when fishing for big cats, you need bigger size gear that you wouldn't use bass fishing or pan fishing. So for a rod, medium heavy to heavy action, the smallest I like to go is 7'6". That's about an ideal size if you're fishing from a boat. It also works good from the bank. But I find that a 10-foot heavy action while fishing from the bank, that way you can kind of get that extra casting distance, works the best for me. So as far as line goes, 20-pound mono is what I use for my main line. I use Berkley Big Game. I've always used that for my main line. Then I use a 50-pound leader below the barrel swivel. The weight sizes that I use never really varies. I use the no-roll sinkers in a 3-ounce to 4-ounce. I'll sometimes go smaller, but that's usually the range that I kind of stick with. And the rig that I use, this one right here, I rarely change this, whether I'm bank fishing or I'm fishing from a boat. It never really changes. The only time I would ever really change the setup would be if it's a rocky area and I kind of need to fish with like a breakaway sinker or breakaway weight. That way I'm not constantly getting snagged and hung up, because that right there will ruin a trip, you know, really, really fast. But hook size, I like to do anywhere from a 5/0 to an 8/0 circle hook. These are usually the main types of hooks I use. I'm not really dialed in on one specific brand, but Bass Pro, you can always go there, Walmart, and get any kind of, circle hook in that size. All right, guys, so mistake number 4 is the patience that is required to catch a big fish. Whether it's a catfish or any kind of big fish in general, just having the patience to sit out there and to put in the work. If catching big fish was easy, I promise you there would be more people doing it. It takes a really long time for catfish to get to what is considered trophy size, and I promise you they did not get that big by not being smart, elusive, and a little sneaky. They are hard to catch. I mean, plain and simple, catfish can be tricky and hard to catch. I always like to tell people that if I only went fishing to catch fish, then my adventures would have ended a long time ago. I think what has helped me the most is just learning to be outside in nature and to enjoy yourself while being outside. will help with developing that patience that is needed that is required in hunting these big fish. Just like I mentioned earlier, the more you study up on how these fish think and move and everything, the easier it will become to catch them. It's just like anything in life. The more you go fishing, the more time you put into it, the more effort, the easier it'll become. So, you just got to develop a little bit of patience, and then, just learn to be okay with maybe not catching a fish every trip, because it's going to happen. You're not going to catch fish every time. So you just kind of got to, that's something that can't be taught. That's something that you just have to learn from yourself, and it takes time just like anything. So okay, mistake number 5 is post-catch care. As I'm talking about what happens once you catch this fish. Now, everyone fishes for different reasons. For me, purely, I fish for sport, relaxation, and really just a break from my everyday life. I do not eat fish, but there are many fishermen who fish because they like to eat what they catch. So with that in mind, I think it's important to remember that these big fish are not the ones to eat. They are old, their meat is tough, it is dark. Your eater-sized fish are going to be much smaller, much younger. I've read studies that show that a blue catfish that weighs 40 pounds on average, he's somewhere in that 15 to 20-year-old range. So if you senselessly go out and kill one of these fish, it's not easily going to be replaced, and it's going to take some time for another fish to get that size to replace him. And these fish are the breeders. These fish are important to the ecosystem because they help keep everything in check. They keep the shad population in check, and bait fish and everything. So I think it's always important to be mindful and respectful of not only the fish but the environment. We want the next generation of fishermen, our kids, grandkids, and outdoorsmen to be able to enjoy what we're enjoying. And if we don't practice, these things, then that's not going to happen for generations to come. Catch, picture, release, I think is very important for this to happen. Now, if you fish to eat them, that's okay. I mean, there are state regulations placed in force from, your local, here it's the TWRA. Just make sure you follow those state guidelines, length requirements and all that and stuff. So, all right. So yeah, that is my top 5 most common mistakes of things that will either ruin a trip while catfishing or cause you just not to be able to catch them. We are pushing right at 500 subscribers, so that is super awesome. I thank you guys so much for tuning in each and every week and checking out the videos. There will be another video tomorrow. Do not quite know where we're going to go or what we're going to target, but we're going to go fishing. So I'm stoked about that. So yeah, hopefully you learned something from this video that you can apply to your fishing to maybe make catching these big catfish a little easier for you. So as always, y'all, God bless. And until next time, hey, let's go fishing, y'all.